I'm going to call the meeting to order. Thank you all for being here. This is our July work session. Dr. Marzak, thank you for Skyping in with us. A lot of business to take care of tonight. Just so you know, we have had a new software, and we're all just we were supposed to have training for it, so luckily we only have a meeting where we'll have one vote, so we can do that by voice vote. So that's why we've been kind of struggling to get on and get everything in order that we need it to be. All right, going down the agenda, the finance is first. However, I don't have anybody here, either Doug or Shipra. Is somebody coming, Chris, or do you want to? Are they in the parking lot? Okay. Okay, then we could move on down to zoning and facilities and let them come on in here in just a few minutes and come back to that. Is that okay with you all? I would prefer that one of them's here. This is a work session where we'll discuss it, and then after the work session we'll have a call special. Oh, here's Doug. Doug, budget is up first, so are we? Oh, okay. All right. First on the agenda is the budget, FY20 budget discussion. You all have gotten a copy of it. I think it was posted on Friday, and hopefully you've had a chance to look at it in this new software or whatever you need here. Dr. Marzak, do you have anything to say about it? Okay, is there any discussion? We're looking at, okay, the budget discussion. The budget that's being presented includes a 2.5% raise for our employees that would start retroactive in September. It would also fund Battle Creek. It would, Dr. Marzak helped me here, and as you know, the commission has authorized us to have $524,821. So this proposes that we need we use a combination of that and fund balance to fund the and the amount is 106. 106,438, right? I can't read.
That's okay. 106,408,438.
All right.
And what we would do is take the county commission funding of 103,524,821 and then balance the rest of our budget for FY20 using fund balance.
Okay. If you all are using this for the first time, you can click at the bottom is the attachment. You click on it, and then there's an X up in the corner. You click on that, and it'll make it bigger. It is a little blurry. I'm sorry for that, obviously, but if you have not been able to access it, now that's how you access it. Doug?
Has everyone been able to look at the attachment yet and take a look at that and still working on it? I will say that on current projections and the financials that are included in your packet tonight, we are estimated to come out right around zero, maybe a small surplus, maybe a small deficit. After we factor in payroll that gets run in July and gets dated back to 18-19 fiscal year on a payroll liability entry. In our fund balance at the beginning of this year, we had $5.4 million per audit. We have to have at least 3% sitting in our fund balance of our operating budget, which that gives us basically $2.2 million to work with if we did not have an increase or a deficit in this year's operations. with that said, in my current estimate, we would only be able to go up to 105.7 million by taking funds out of our fund balance. I also do not think it's financially responsible to do that, and the reason is you should not be using one-time funds for a permanent recurring raise that is an expenditure that is going to exceed beyond next fiscal year if we are increasing salaries permanently. So we do not have the fund balance to make it happen without going below our 3% test. So I would recommend if this school board would like to still achieve that goal of giving that raise, simply put, we're going to need some more revenue.
Let me say, Dr. Marzak, also you can speak to this.
Yes, ma'am.
We did not receive but $4,300,000 from BEP this month, 5.8 last month. So that was a red flag, and we understand that they have figures that are not agreeing with what we say, and they have that we have a loss of students, whereas our figures say we have a gain. So, Dr. Marzak, can you speak to that?
Yes, so on Friday, I had a call with Mary Ann Durkee, the head of finance for the Tennessee Department of Education, and we compared our numbers. And our data analyst person, Jennifer Morgan, did think that there was a transfer problem with our data system called EIS with the state, and they're showing up on the state side as having less students than what we have on our side. So Jennifer has been in contact with another member of the Department of Education, her name is Elfrida Taylor, that is looking to remedy that problem by creating her own spreadsheet and then delivering it to Mary Ann Durkee to accurately reflect our numbers. Mary Ann understands there's a transfer problem with the EIS. She's not sure why there is. And she stated it was her goal this week to get it squared away, to get our accurate numbers reflected to the state, so that we're receiving ADM for all of our students that we should be.
Which is a significant amount of money, the difference.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So that money we would get once that is cleared up, correct? Okay. Mr. Pennings?
Didn't we have the same problem last year? If I recall right, we had the same problem last year. They had us for less people than we actually had, and we had to renew the figures.
Yeah. And we're lucky, Mr. Pennings, that we have a data analyst on the ADM side, like Jennifer Morgan, who keeps a close watch on that stuff. Because if not, we just have to take the state's number at face value. But she's done a really good job going back to making sure all the schedules were accurate, and she's reflecting a higher ADM than the state.
Well, my question is, why is this happening 2 years in a row?
According to Mary Ann Durkee on Friday, she didn't know why it was happening. She couldn't answer that question. But she said what she would do is this week she'd look into it and see why it was taking place.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I see the lights and I ask you a question. When you spoke with Chris on Friday, and Chris, we discussed, you said that it was that what we're presenting here today was possible, but what you're saying too is that we need more revenue to be able to sustain it for the next year. Is that what you're saying?
I don't remember saying that that we could do it Friday, because I didn't have an estimate until I sent out the financials Friday evening. But, you know, looking at projections on where our fund balance is going to go, we're at a $5 million surplus right now. But the thing is payroll is 2.5 million, and we've got 2 of them, and they're coming regardless, guaranteed expenditures. So I don't see us coming in at a surplus as of right now. I would say if you also are going to give a raise, you don't want to have to go back next year and say, hey, you know, that raise we gave you, we got to take back because we didn't get what we thought we were going to get in BEP funding. We would have to increase our BEP funding above 2.3 million just to cover that gap increase with the raise. That doesn't include next year's step raises or anything for diploma, or any possible new programs, or any increases in natural costs from our vendors, just particular inflation. So I think that it's extremely dangerous to take a chunk, and to just be blunt, I mean, we would be out of compliance with the state's 3% test, if we did it without any other revenue. So.
With this, difference of opinion on the number of students we have, what happens if we don't win and ultimately the state, we had to use the state figures?
Well, it's not a matter of winning, it's a matter of proving that we have the number of ADM that we have, and we have the evidence to prove that. So it's to the point of, the woman that Jennifer is working with, Alfreda Taylor, on the state level, she's modifying spreadsheets to accurately reflect our ADM.
But it's your opinion that we have proof that we've got, that our figures are right, but we're playing in the state's ball field and the state's rules, and if they say we don't have proof, what are we gonna do?
Yeah, and that's why I was encouraged by, my conversation with Mary Ann Durkee on Friday, is it seemed as though she was receptive to the fact that state databases on their side were wrong, because she didn't push that, she wasn't confrontational, so it seems to me like this is not the first conversation she's had with the superintendent about having inaccurate ADMs between the district and the state, so that's why she was willing and open to, figure out why the numbers are not transferred correctly.
Okay.
Ms. Parker?
Dr. Marzak, what would the discrepancy result in funds for us? What's the difference that we're looking at potentially adding?
If I heard the question correctly, Ms. Parker, the difference is quite a couple $100,000 in dollars. And not only that, but that's for growth money that happened during the 18-19 year. It would reflect, 7,800, roughly 40 students. Do the math, my calculator's not being used here. It could possibly look at the difference between, it could roughly be the difference, potential growth-wise, of almost $500,000. At least, if they have it projected correctly for next year, which they don't.
Mr. Pennings?
If I'm hearing you right, Doug, you're saying that we're about 2.5 short if we wanna give that 2.5% raise, basically out of fund balance. So that would mean next year that if we gave the teachers or the employees a 2.5 raise, we'd have to figure 5% in the budget, 'cause we're 2.5 short this year. Well, that just hardly seems fair to the teachers for me. I think they're worth more than a 2.5% increase. These figures from the county commission don't reflect doing anything for McDowell. And I'm sorry, but we have to get those children out of McDowell, period, before the building falls down around our ears or the state or federal government decide to come along and condemn the building. And I feel sorry for the county commissioners. They've got a tough job too, but my opinion is we sent you a budget in the discussion.
I will say this, I know all of you are aware that the county commission, they're getting a 3%, their employees are getting a 3% raise. 31 cents is being voted on to be added to the tax rate. 6 cents of that is for us. We need more, of course. 2.5% is simply a cost of living raise. It's not even putting us anywhere competitive with the counties. It's not even making us even level competitive with them. And I accept that. I accept that there can't be maybe a 3% raise, but I don't accept that we tell our employees another year that they really don't get a raise. Now, what's got to happen to be able to sustain the raise, and that's what you're talking about. We can make this raise in this budget this year, but to sustain it is the problem. I can't believe there won't be increased funds in property tax. All we hear is how many are moving. We see the houses being built. We know they're here, they're coming. I can't believe that sales tax won't be improved as well. I can't believe there won't be any more BEP money when we've got 2 new schools and more teachers on board. I can't believe that. But with that said too, one of the jobs we have, if we approve this budget, one of the jobs that we have as a board, and you may not like hearing me say this, but yes, I think we have to do some right sizing. I think we have to look at staff, maybe handle it through attrition, create some funds that can sustain the raise and have extra funds so that we don't have to go through this every year. There's other things we can look at. The step raises over the years, I mean, they just are all over the place. There might be 1,000 this year, 700, 5, or none in 16 and 18. So I would like to look at that and see how we can equalize as not bringing them up to the highest, but taking those funds and make them so that you know every year what your raise is. And you might find some savings there as well. There's other areas we can look in. This is just me talking. I haven't, we pay supplements based on that person's place on the salary schedule, okay? So coach might teach 5 years. They get raises along with their salary schedule, and then it's multiplied by whatever that is. It's a multiplier. But what if they're just paid a set amount? For instance, I'll use me as an example. I taught 5 years. If I'd have continued teaching, I was a cheerleading sponsor, okay? So I got whatever that was at that time. If I'd have continued teaching and then many years later I was asked to be the cheerleading sponsor again, go figure. That would have been computed on my salary at 20 years, not where I was then. That could be not substantial, but another area in which we can look at and try to make our budget a little more efficient. But I cannot fathom that we won't go ahead and approve this raise this year for them and do the work we need to do so that we can sustain it for next year and have extra, because we're not going to be able to see any growth. We're not going to be able to do anything until we kind of get some of this under control. And that's where I am with it. First of all, understand where fund balance is, but payroll won't start until September. I would hope that we would have some increase in revenue during that time, and maybe by January we'll be able to do some changes as well. That's just me. Okay. Mr. Howell?
So Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, the county gave a 3% raise to its employees last year.
3% merit raise.
Okay. And they're wanting to do a 3% this year.
Cost of living.
Okay. But they're asking us to not give a raise to teachers this year. They're not funding it, I should say.
That's more accurate, yeah.
Okay. Also, so I guess they don't value the teachers like we do. I'm not asking you that question. I'm just making that as a general statement. Or they think that we pay our teachers too much, I guess, is maybe a more general statement. I just really have a huge problem that they can give their employees a raise 2 years in a row. And I'm sorry, we did give teachers a raise last year. I believe it was $200. Correct. So I mean, I guess that's the value of a teacher. Unfortunately, I just don't see that as even a raise. I understand that there are step raises. I get that. That's a contractual thing, I believe. That's standard across the board for all teachers in the state of Tennessee. That's not a Murray County thing. I just don't see how we can continue to not give not just teachers, support staff, maintenance guys. These people work hard to ensure that we educate our kids. I don't understand the county commission. I understand it involves raising taxes. If we were a taxing agency, it would be on us to take that brunt. Unfortunately, the state of Tennessee doesn't allow that. I understand that growth is here. We all know growth is here. Unfortunately, I believe I have learned that growth doesn't pay for growth. Residential property doesn't pay for residential expenses. I believe I've heard the number, for every $100 we bring in revenue from residential, we spend $130. So they put in 3,000 more houses. We're in the hole for every single house that they put in here. So growth pays for growth. Whoever coined that doesn't understand how government finance works. Commercial taxes pay for growth, but we have what we have. So to say that, it doesn't work that way. And I believe, Ms. Kinzer, you are correct. I am working with Chris Pointer on some sort of pay scale that is a little more fair and equitable, and that rewards athletic coaches for sticking with it and staying with it, provided that they're good coaching. There has to be quality coaching. And not only that, but it will reward them for extending their season. So if they go to a state championship, they get a little bit of a bonus. That's an incentive for them to work harder to ensure that we have quality coaches. So yeah, there's a place we can maybe tighten the belt. That's not $2.8 million's worth. I don't agree with using fund balance. I cannot support using fund balance for ongoing expenses. I know that we're going to have BEP coming. Maybe. I'm learning now that we may not have as much as we thought in BEP coming. So using our savings account to pay for an ongoing expense, I can't do that at home. I don't know how I could do it here. So either we're going to have to find more revenue, or the county's going to have to find more revenue, or we just can't give a raise. I still find that extremely appalling that we can give everybody else in the county a raise, but the people who educate our children. I guess we don't truly want to live in an educated society. I do.
Mr. Moore?
Well, Chad, you stole all the things I wanted to say. Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with Mr. Howell on a lot of these things. I'm personally, I've looked this over. I cannot be in favor of using the fund balance to meet this kind of shortfall. I mean, personally, I don't like, it's just bad budgeting procedure all around. And then the idea, and I understand that we have some BEP money that's supposed to come in. Again, I don't know what that is, and I don't think you meant to, Chair Kinzer, but you used the word hope about how much is coming in, and it's just a red flag to me. If we got a hope on something, we've been burned before. I don't feel like getting burned on this again. I think it's setting us up to fall down and fall hard next year, as Mr. Pennings was saying. If we run into a problem, we've got to double up and cover the fact that it didn't come in. So I don't know. I guess I don't want to care about blaming people or how we got to get there, but one way or another, we either have to go back to the county commission and ask for this amount again if we as a board decide that that's what we feel is appropriate, or we need to find cuts, or we need to cut something in our budget, or a combination thereof. But one of those things needs to happen. And I would rather us start to pretty quickly as a board figure out which one of those we want to gravitate towards, and if we want to stick to what this number is, if we feel like that's the appropriate number, I'd rather us go ahead and do that than and move on with this and send it back to the county commission. If not, if we feel like there are some more cuts we need to make, or we need to have some further budget discussions under the budget committee, or however we want to handle that, then maybe that's what we need to do. If we as a board feel like we need to do some more due diligence in that regard, if maybe we feel like we can squeeze a few more pennies out of it, I'm open to that as well. I'd rather us go ahead and move towards one of those things than kind of get stalled out on hoping on money that may or may not happen.
Pennings, I'm sorry.
Well, I agree with you, Ms. Kinzer, that we have to rework the supplements. But even reworking them isn't going to help this year. It's just not going to help this year. And I'm like Mr. Howell. I don't run my checking account on hoping my Social Security check comes in, or hoping that I get a raise at the end of the year from Social Security. We see nothing for McDowell, we see nothing for Spring Hill. Something has to be done with McDowell. We know something has to be done with Spring Hill. Sitting here and I look at our teachers, and I like to look people in the eye, and I can't look these teachers in the eye. This is ridiculous. You have teachers all over the United States, excuse me, wanting to go on strike unless they get 10% raise. I haven't heard our teachers say we'll strike if we don't get it. They say if that's all you can do, okay. And they carry on like they always have. But it's time that the county commission and the taxpayers of this county value the teachers as much as I believe the school board does.
Let me say this about the teachers. I was at both budget meetings, and they were too. They were there in their red shirts, sitting in the front row. It made a tremendous difference. I don't know if you know this, but at one point they were just going to give us 102.1, not fund Battle Creek. Their presence there made a huge difference, and some commissioners actually spoke directly to them. Okay? Did they give us enough? No. They did not. But I feel like that we owe to them and to the children that we educate to be able to provide the best staff we can, and we've got to be able to attract them. I don't think this is going to give us any kind of big boost in that, but I would prefer we send the budget back to the commission with a 2.5% raise, that we do our best to create less spending this year, that we are able to find some pockets of savings. Think in terms of as people retire. We had over 40 people retired this year. If we had taken that and just used that as attrition and started right sizing, that would have been a $2 million bump right there. I mean, and I'm not, this board knows I have not been in favor of that, but I know we have to do it, because personnel is almost 90% of our budget, and that's too much. So, I don't know how you feel about it. I hear you say our employees should have a raise, but we can't do this. I hear you say they deserve it, but we can't do this. I don't know what the right thing to do is, but I would vote to do this as presented. When we have, I mean, that's just me. I just cannot tell them who work so hard to stand behind us and support us in this journey that they can't get a raise. I just can't do it. So that's where I am.
Thank you once again, Chairwoman. Yeah, better than chairman, right? I know that before I was Murray County's finance director, and now I'm also y'all's, and I'm very proud to be. And I just want to go through a couple things pertaining to this budget and future budgets that we go through together. So I've got a few bullet points I want to review. Being financially responsible, we've gotten to this point in a few different ways, but our maintenance of effort, the property tax growth, is an increase every year as long as we're growing, and we're going to continue to see that without having to raise taxes. And moving forward, if we can be more financially responsible after this budget and know that our growth is going to be such and such dollars, then we can prioritize that money and put it to where this school board wants to. So that was bullet one. Bullet two is building financial faith and trust into what the school board and the central office is doing going forward. It is really hard for people to make a decision on financials that had 10 audit findings. They don't feel that they can trust it in citizens, and I've had a lot of people call me, but building that trust, correcting these issues, and getting a clean set of financials will give us more credibility when saying we need money, because we didn't have those audit findings. We'll have a cleaner audit. So that's actually in my wheelhouse. I'm going to do my best to build that financial faith and trust by reducing those audit findings. The commission has proposed right now 33.19 cents, and, they have more discussions on this Thursday to talk about moving that around, and we'll see what they end up coming out with. And next year, we have to keep in mind, things that we have factored into our budget this year are an automatic increase to next year's budget. One of those things is, the step. We can go ahead and factor right now that this operating budget, whatever is approved, is gonna be approximately greater than $1 million more than next year. Now, this year, our property tax growth without raising taxes would cover that. So that's just something to keep in mind as we go forward into future budgets and we consider figures. And something that kind of throws a wrench into using all of our fund balance is because the state holds us at that 3% limit. If I construct a budget and I've got the water department and I've got food service and I've got GP and I've got federal and I've got the county budget and I turn it all in, they're gonna look at it and they're gonna test that 3% and they're gonna have me include the fund balance in that submission. And there's a good, hearty chance that if we take it all out of fund balance, they'll just send it back to me. A budget hasn't been sent back not in my lifetime. So, I do feel that the smart, financially responsible option is to ask for more revenue, from the county commission, just because of the recurring expenditure, and it's not truly an investment in the teachers if we can only do it 1 year. And I usually don't weigh in, I don't have an opinion, I'm just trying to disperse information, and I think that it's not financially responsible to take it out of our savings to do a one-time thing that is truly unsure until I have some sort of documentation saying, you know what, our BEP is gonna go up $3 million next year. I'm very hesitant to say that taking it out of fund balance in any course of action is a responsible move for the school board. So, that is all I have, and thank you.
Would we have to pass a budget to take it to them, or can we just simply, how would you ask for more pennies?
Sorry, I would go ahead and send the proposal asking for more funds back to them. If we would have tonight accepted their original proposal, I think we'd be sending a budget for final approval.
Right,
but since we disagree with the school board disagrees with the $103,524,821,
then we would
needs to go back to them.
We would need to send the proposal we're proposing to them.
Correct.
For more funding.
Correct.
Okay, I don't know who's came on first, they all three. Ms. Morency?
Yes, can you explain, what the fund balance again, what we have in the fund balance, or what you think that we have in the fund balance?
Per last year's audit, we began this year with 5.4 million, just above that in fund balance. We're currently running we're at a surplus right now of $5 million, but our payroll generally runs 2.4 to 2.5 million. And so 2 payrolls, which we had payroll today, and we'll have another payroll at the end of this month for the 18-19 year, will bring us right around zero. So this is an estimate, it's not exact. We're still doing accounts payable and accounts receivable journal entries, but we will be close to having either a small surplus or a small deficit for this year's operations.
So that does that include the 3%, or is the 3% do we have the 3% and then we're at zero?
2.5.
We have above that, so actually 3% of the current proposed budget would be around 3.1 to 3.2 million. So we have 2.2 million that we are able to balance our budget with, but if we're balancing it for a recurring expenditure with one-time money, it's not a financially responsible decision in my opinion.
Okay, I guess I still don't. When you say we'll be at zero after we pay the
payroll,
is that not counting the 3% that's, or 2, whatever it is that's in there that we have to have? by state law?
So if we had I'm saying the operations for the year would come in at 0 for the year. We would not have any profit, we would not have any loss. We're gonna be right around that 0. So our fund balance at the beginning of the year was 5.4 million, so the estimate is that it's gonna be at 5.4 million again to begin the next year.
Okay.
So we have to have at least 3% of our budget, that's 3.1 or 3.2. So that gives us a gap of 2.2 million.
2.2 million, okay, thank you. Okay,
And that zeroing out would be at the end of the year, not, I mean, this money wouldn't go out all at once. You know, we would hopefully be able to have increased revenue or whatever, but during the year, create some,
We would hope that we would exceed our revenue
once
projections.
again, hope, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but this would exceed we're hoping we exceed our revenue projections as any person that develops a budget hopes for, so.
And as a person who develops a budget, you tend to take the conservative side because that's just the best way to do it.
You never know what expense you might need to cut, what emergency may come up that we
Right.
would have to fund.
Right,
So.
okay. Mr. Moore, was your light on? I'm sorry.
It was. I just had a real quick question. What is since we're talking about tax rate increases, for the full amount that we had asked for, what would be the difference in that? So they're talking about, what, 32 cents or like 33 cents? What would it be above that?
Do you want the total 33.19 plus our request?
Yeah.
Okay, so hang on.
Understanding that roughly 6 cents of the 32 is us already, so I'm looking at what the overall increase to the average person that would be looking at this would be looking at. And while he's doing that, I mean, I ask that because it's a relevant thing for us to look at, is, if we're asking this is what we're asking the public to, in essence, pay. If that's how the county is deciding they're gonna fund this, is with a tax increase.
And that was gonna be my question also, what the value of the penny is.
The value of the penny at this point in time is $237,328 for each individual penny. Currently, the proposal is 33.19 cents. This would require an additional 12.15 cents to get us to the 106,408,438, a total tax rate of 45.34 increase on the tax rate. And that would bring the, hold on one second, 223, bring the tax rate to 2.6898. The current tax rate is 2.2364.
But for every penny they would give us back, we would realize more money that would not let us leave the year at 0. It would be more
For next year,
for
it
next
would.
year.
It would not
That's your
impact the
concern.
current
It wouldn't
year.
impact the current year, but
Mhm.
for next year.
For the 1920 fiscal year, correct.
Mr. Howe. I'm sorry, no, Mr. Dudley, let me, and turn
Thank
your
you,
light.
Madam Chair. Well, we talk about trust. I have some trust issues with the commission. Two, they've known the condition of McDowell for years. They've known that we we're going to have to replace it. Spring Hill, they've known for years the overcrowding or the issues that we have at Spring Hill High School, and they've known that we're going to have to do an addition or some sort of additional school. They've known our teachers need raises just like everybody else needs raises. You know, if the county employees need a raise, our people need raises too. You know, so they've known all this, and they refuse to fund it. They refuse to take the tough steps of raising the taxes to cover the cost. You know, we've got to continue maintaining our schools. That's one reason our budget request is where it's at, I believe, is 'cause we still haven't reached full maintenance position for our schools. You know, I just, my opinion is I don't wanna cut anything. I would like to submit it back to the, commission at the rate we had and, not do any further cutting.
Okay, excuse me, Mr. Howe.
Mr. LeConnon, real quick, the 106,408, that includes a 2.5% or 3% raise?
That's a 2.5% raise.
But not starting.
On,
Gotcha.
Mr. O'Connor.
for clarification, Mr. Pennings asked what the difference in the tax rate would be and how much would somebody with a $200,000 home pay in addition. It would be $227 if our proposal is accepted. So that would be at a tax rate of 2.6898. That would only be for homes in the county. If any of the city tax rates change upwards, I haven't heard currently where they're at in their budget process. If they change upwards, then people in the city would be impacted differently.
The teachers that were at the meeting stood up and told the commissioners that they were willing to pay higher property taxes, and they spoke to that. You know, that's just part of progress that we have to do. Mr. Howell.
So $27 additionally?
227.
200.
Okay, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I misunderstood.
Mr. Penning.
Keep in mind too, I mean, we gave teachers $200 last year, whatever we gave them. So that didn't really affect their pay this year. I mean, when you're limiting them to 2.5% now, that doesn't just affect next year's pay, that affects every year after that. Every year, it adds up. I just cannot vote for any budget that limits us the way this limits us. I'm willing to go with the 106, 408, 430, 438, and say here it is.
Okay, seeing no lights, then I'm gonna move on, and we'll have a call special in which we will, address this and see where we are, okay? If no other comments? All right, excuse me, I'm sorry. Do you have your light on?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess one question that I have is, have we looked at our budget where that we have cut as much as we can really stand to cut out of our budget before we go back and ask for the 106?
I believe we have. I believe last year's budget proposal was 115, and it got cut down to 109, and it got cut down to the 101. I mean, I guess we can sit here and play games with them all day, and I wanted to ask for more so that when they said, no, you can't do 110, and then it comes down to 106, and it's like, hey, that's where we wanted to be anyways. I don't believe in just playing these games. We've asked for what we've asked for. We've cut as much as we cut. We're not asking for the world. We're not asking for a bunch of new things. We're literally asking for what we had last year to open 2 new schools in a high-growth area and a simple 3% raise for our employees that didn't get a raise last year at all. I don't know what we can cut. I mean, I guess we just don't give teachers a raise? I don't think that's fair. When every other county employee has gotten a 3% this year and a 3% last year, I just don't feel that's fair at all.
Mr. Pennings?
I asked Dr. Marzak this question when he submitted this budget. If this was a bare bones budget, his answer was yes. Is it still yes?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
it's, when we presented it the other, at the budget meeting, they asked the question, were there any new positions in it, and there were at that time 2 positions in it. Other than that, there were no changes in anything, so. I think it's a bare bones budget. I think it's, Battle Creek actually, was estimated to cost a lot more than it's actually going to cost, so we've kind of absorbed some of that. I think 3.6 is what we thought. Is that correct, Dr. Marzak? And we're gonna bring it in a little bit less, but that's basically what we've had to look at here, is the opening to those 2 new schools that we've got to do. And, but anyway, that's where we are. Is there anyone else that wants to speak to this? Ms. Parker.
Sorry, I will just say that you mentioned right sizing, and I think we've talked about that for, I don't know, probably at least 2 years now. And I don't think with the information that we've been provided as a board that we ourselves can do the right sizing. It's just not, it's not possible. That's gonna take staff doing the work, and when you actually have, a budget that's submitted that really just has the highlights in it, I mean, I can't tell the detail in any of this. I can't tell what we can cut. I mean, I'm actually looking to the superintendent for that. And I think we've had several years. We knew Battle Creek was opening. We knew this was coming down the pipe. I have a lot of financial trust issues with anything that gets submitted at this point. I'm in that boat. When we've had 2 years of horrible audit findings, I just tried to make a list of all the things that we've had in our budgets in the past that we don't have in our budget now, that somehow or another we've managed to operate our schools. It wasn't bare bones, it was bare bones then, but, we don't have VACO anymore. We don't have Discovery Ed. We don't have Mile. We don't have Dreambox. I'm not saying that that's necessarily good, but I'm just saying we've spent money, and I think it's reasonable for taxpayers to ask for a return. And I agree that teachers need to be fairly compensated, and I would love to give them a raise. But I cannot support anything that requires us taking any money out of fund balance at this time. Now, if the county wants to give us, I hate to see, a 30+ cent tax increase go through and teachers not get a raise. I think that's ridiculous. But I do think that there's the potential that there may be some things there that could still be cut, that staff would have to give us that information. We don't have that information. We've done it in the past. We've cut we've cut VACO, we've cut Discovery Ed, we've cut Mine, we've cut Dreambox. What else is on the table? I mentioned Alleview. I know, Mr. Lukonen, since you've taken over the finances, is Alleview something that we've got to have?
That's actually an expenditure in my department, and I cut their cost in half on my side. We were at $48,000 a year. Part of that was consultation and building a budget, so I cut that out. I think Alleview is a useful tool for people to get numbers fast that aren't in financial roles, and it is accurate. I have reviewed it, and it matches with our Skyward reports to the penny. I will say, we discover things every day that need to be fixed. It's an ongoing process, but I do anticipate an improved audit this year.
And I do trust that you will be able to deliver that. Again, seeing the detail, I don't know what you've cut. So I don't know that you've cut half of Alleview. That's great. That makes me feel a lot better about this, but you're one department, and I know how conservative you are on the numbers. I just need to know somewhat how everyone else is coming to their numbers as well.
Mine's on the county side as well, so I can send that detail if needed.
Well, let me say this, Ms. Parker, we've had, I don't know how many, 5 budget meetings, and we've gone through them line by line, those that have been here with us. So it's not the fact that you've been presented this last document like it is. There were 17 pages that we've gone through. Some of us have gone through them line by line. I know I did. Here's the man that met with every department and went over those things and the additions to them. So whatever you felt in the past is not the present. this board and those that attended those budget meetings spent a huge amount of time looking at all those pages. And hopefully, those that were not able to attend looked at them at home, because there they were. So I think the information is there, and I think this is a bare bones budget. Do we need to do some things going forward? Absolutely we do, and the time has come, and right sizing has got to happen. Okay.
I want to clarify that when I meet with departments, or I meet with Chris or Stan or Amanda or any of the leaders and part of the admin staff, that I am not there to cut their budget. I am there to take their recommendation. They are the experienced educators. I am not. If they tell me that this is what they need for the classroom, if they tell me that that's what they need for operations, the HR department, the IT department, whoever it may be, you know, I'm going to take that information and put it in a format for you to see the cost of. I'm an information provider, and I don't think I should be in charge of cutting or increasing anybody's budgets. I think you as a school board have that authority in choosing what you think is a good budget. So I just want to clarify that.
Thank you. I didn't mean to put it off on you. Is there any other discussion? All right, the June financials, I think that's where I saw the BEP reduction that month and that concern in that, the June. Did any of you have any questions about the June financials, the next thing on the agenda? Okay, then moving on. Ready then for zoning and facilities, future direction of the design and addition to Spring Hill High School. Are you here to speak to us about that?
May I speak
Yes,
first,
please.
Madam Chair? And let me tell you that we're like you, we're learning how to use the new agenda system, and so we've got our agenda items before the reports, and typically the reports are first. So we'll get that straightened out before the next meeting. But if you have any questions on our normal reports there, you'll see our reports on our update on our Battle Creek schools, the reports we get from training, our capital project reports. Before I get into the other, does anybody have any questions on those? Well, we have two agenda items. One of the smallest zoning and facilities agendas we've had because of the time of year it is. We're finishing up, let me just say that we're finishing up a myriad of summer projects. Dave Hall's sitting right back there, and I've told him this summer he's been on roller skates, because he has really done a tremendous job of overseeing. If you've been into any of our schools, I was at several last week. I meant to get to more today, but schools like Spring Hill Elementary School, where we're getting all new doors on the exterior of the building, Hampshire Unit School, where it's getting new HVAC doors and windows, Mount Pleasant High School. I could go on and on. I won't. Brown Elementary, lots and lots of changes going on. So because of that, we're kind of getting everything wrapped up. But we do have two items that we wanted to bring to you. One is, at the last meeting, you were presented with two pieces of information last month. One was a guaranteed maximum price for McDowell Elementary, the replacement of it. The design work has gotten far enough along that Hewlett Spencer was able to do that. And I know, my understanding is that was not accepted by the county commission, and they've put off funding anything for any additional schools till next year, looks like. But the second part of that was you were presented and by the way, let me just say, and Hewlett Spencer is here, also Ben Metz from ESA, and they can answer question specifics, but I think they would tell you that guaranteed maximum price presented for McDowell will not be the same one you'll see next year. They can't tell you what it'll be, because it'll go back out to bid before it would come back to you. But on Spring Hill High School, you were presented basically a conceptual drawing with a request to give some direction as whether to proceed with design. And I think, I wasn't at the board meeting, but I don't think that was acted on. So we put it back on the agenda this month to see if you wanted to consider Moving forward, we have some additional numbers. Last month, they told you they did not have any estimated cost numbers. We do have those from them tonight. If you want to talk about that, understand that, again, there will be no funding happen next year, but unless Design Works begins on that, they cannot bring you back a guaranteed maximum price. And so without the board giving an okay to proceed with design work and actually looking at some things that we need to show you about that, that project is on hold and would need several more months of work before you would have a guaranteed max price. So I just put it on the agenda. We have a presentation that I just got this afternoon if you want to talk about that, or I'll ask your pleasure on that.
What is the board's pleasure on it? Yes, I would say, I think we need to proceed.
Okay.
I mean, is correct, Mr. Moore?
Before we get into that, I mean, I guess the question we would have as a board is how do we want to proceed on this? So something I had brought up a while back and saying I would ask if we could, because if we're not going to, if the county commission is not going to fund either one of these, what are our plans? Because from what we've talked about, from what I understand the conditions at McDowell, and I don't know, as a school district, how are we addressing that over the next year? Actually, technically, we're looking at how would we be addressing that over the next 3 years or so. Even if it were to be approved next year, we're looking at another 2 years or so to have a new building put in place. Same thing for Spring Hill High School. If we're not going to be doing anything this year, we already know we're going to be at capacity, if not over capacity, as of the start of this year in a couple of weeks. How do we proceed throughout this next school year, knowing that we're going to gain students throughout the year? What does that look like? Have we been, as a district, looking at how to address that? I mean, I'm just into the functional thing. Again, if the county's not going to fund it, we've got to functionally still solve the problem in some way, and that's what I would be looking at, rather than. I mean, I still would like to talk about other options if there are other options, but functionally, we've got to continue with business, and that's kind of my main concern. If again, right now the county's saying they're not funding this, so my main concern is what are we doing in the meantime? Would be what I would be looking for first.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Breeden, if we were to say we want to proceed with the design work, where would those funds come from?
We had previously received, if you'll remember, $2 million, of which $1 million went to the design of McDowell. The other $1 million was for the design of Spring Hill High School. Now, depending on how the board wants to proceed and what I have to show you is that $1 million will not hardly get us to a full product for a GMP, but I'd need to kind of go through the numbers to show you. But we have not spent all of that yet, all of that $1 million for that design.
But we do not have enough funds to completely fund the design work at Spring Hill.
We do not, no, sir. To proceed with the total addition like you looked at last month.
Okay.
Once again, the question is, do you want him to go forward, show us what he's got, or do we just, Mr. Beaver?
I don't see any problem in looking at what Stan's got. I think it'd give us an idea of what we're doing.
I think we know the need, it needs to be, they kind of commissioned us to look into this. We may need to look at it in terms of doing it in phases or whatever. I'd like to see what you have. Mr. Dudley?
Well, I would certainly like to hear what Stan has, but at the same time, I don't want us to say we want to go through with the design and then not have the money to pay for it. So, if we got the funds to pay for it, it's one thing, but if we don't, I think we need to just sort of slow down where we're at.
Mr. Howell?
What is the difference in funding? How much more do we need to finish funding the design phase? I mean, just a ballpark.
Well, it depends on what you want to do, so I really would need you to show you all of this to answer. It'll take about 10 minutes.
Well, yeah, show us that.
Let me go through that. And then I'll even speak to what Mr. Moore brought up, if I can get through that in just a few minutes. Have you switched over to my computer, Dave? I can't tell. Okay. basically they took the design that you saw last month. And again, I'm not gonna get into specifics, they can answer questions. The construction costs that you see here on the screen, this number, $42,910,000 is what they projected on that. That was construction. That's before you add what normally is referred to as the soft costs. Soft costs are the cost for design, the cost for administration, the cost for furnishings, fixtures, and equipment, low voltage, and that kind of stuff, which we normally, as a rule of thumb, estimate at 20%. So when you add 20% on top of that, you can see you're getting close to $50 million. So what Hewlett Spencer went back and sat down with the architect and their team and looked at how could we reduce this scope to get into a more reasonable budget. And there's some alterations there. They reduced the auditorium scope. Again, not really kept it as a similar auditorium in function of what you see at Central High School, but they changed some things from a 2-story to 1-story and several things. There was the original proposal had built in a new performance gym, turning the existing performance gym into practice gym. This says build a new practice gym, keep the existing performance gym as a performance gym. The caveat with that is the performance gym now has an 84-foot court, which is regulation high school basketball court, but TSSAA will only award district tournaments to schools that have a 94-foot court, which we do not have there now. But they did make that change. There was some changes in the remodel of the locker rooms. They had added a choral room, which there's not a choral program now, so they took that out. There still would be an expanded band room, but they didn't add a choral. And they added a choral room because we built a choral room at Central, but there's not a choral program at Spring Hill. So they took that out. They deleted some things where they were remodeling some corridors, and they got the construction price down to $35,851,436. Then added on the soft costs, which put it right at $43 million. Of course, we've already funded $1 million of that, and so that would leave needed $42 million. But with that, right now we've actually, the design fees to get to a GMP, to get to the design development phase, which is about half the design fees, total design fees, needed would be $1,236,604. We've actually issued a PO for $954,144. Now, I told you we had $1 million. The other money is sitting there because we've got some things outside of this. There's got to be a geotech study done. That'll cost about $20,000 or $30,000. So we hadn't before. That's how much they had asked for, and that's what we issued PO. So that needs us still needing $282,460 to get the design to get to a $43 million building or whatever the Again, these are cost estimates. This is not a GMP. I know Hewlett Spencer's back there saying, make sure they know this is not a bid number. This is just a cost estimate based on square footage. And so that is what they looked at. Now, as a second option, and I think Mr. Moore sent out an email today talking about options, there is a second option is if this was phased. Again, can't build phase one and be an 1,800 student high school. This would be phase one, and then within 2 or 3 years build to phase two and to get to an 1,800. And to phase it, you really got to build it in pieces. You can't say, well, I want to do this part on the front and this part. So what they did is they said if we just built the front part, if you'll remember from the discussion last month, and Mr. Metz is here and he can go back through his plans, but the front, if you remember, was a new cafeteria, auditorium, a wing that included some CTE classes, I rolled way back in time and said vocational. CTE classes on the bottom floor, some new chemistry labs on the upper floor, new administrative space, new library. That all went on the front. And then on the back was new gym, new choir, band room, some additional athletic dressing rooms and things to meet the athletic program need. And so that number, if I can go down to the next page, they actually pieced all those costs together, and that number would be at a construction cost of $26 million. When you add the soft costs on, that makes it about $31. Again, already funded $1 million, so that's $30 million. I'm sorry, thank you, $30 million. The design fees to get there for a GMP is $889,450. which of course we've already issued a PO for 954, 144, so we've actually got $65,000 over that. So we do have enough money to design a phase one, but we don't have enough money to design the full deal without coming up with an extra almost $300,000. So that's quickly trying to answer your question there, Mr. Howell, if that does that. I will go ahead, while I've got the floor, before I answer questions, that we have talked about what Mr. Moore asked as far as what happens if we don't get this and it's 2 or 3 years down the road. We have talked about that in our staff meetings briefly, but have not yet come up with any kind of detailed plans. And, well, I was going to turn to Dr. Marzak, but he's no longer there to speak to that. So I can't, any further decisions will have to come through recommendations that would come through him. We've talked about it, but I can't tell you of any specific plans because there's none that I'm aware of that have been finalized.
Thank you, Mr. Breeden. Mr. Howell?
So when Spring Hill was built, it was built to accommodate 800.
No.
Well,
my understanding was it was built to accommodate about 800 students, and I don't know the exact numbers. Before it was finished, there was an additional academic wing added to it, which really raised it up to be able to serve. Now, since then, also, there's been some addition at the band room. There's been 2 or 3 additions to the school other than just that, and I don't have those numbers in front of me, but to remember that. But, yeah, I think originally it started out about 800.
That's what I understood. 800 originally was the core. So your auditorium, your cafeteria, band room, gymnasiums, and then somewhere along the way they said, "Well, we got some extra money," or who knows what happened, and they said, "Well, let's add a whole other wing over here, add an academic wing." So now, although our core is still 800, we can hold 1,200 students in these classrooms. We just can't serve them lunch efficiently, or we can't have the auditorium, or we can't have the sports and athletics. So at some point we've added on here or there, we've added this or that. I get that. So I guess what I'm getting at is with this phasing, we're kind of going to be doing the same thing. We're going to say, well, we're going to address part of the core problem, but we're really just not going to address the whole problem. And I understand. I appreciate the effort. I know what you're trying to do, which is reduce costs so that something can get done. But is that the right thing? I just don't think it is. I think that we have multiple schools here in Murray County. We have 2 major high schools. One is Columbia Central. It has 1,800 student capacity. And the other one is Spring Hill High School, which has an 8 to 1,200 student capacity, depending on how you want to look at that. We're going to exceed that capacity of just students. So we're going to be shoving 1,200 students through a facility that was designed for 800. I don't know a way out of that. I don't know how we can add portables around here, but I mean, unless we're putting taco trucks around out front to have them to feed food trucks, I don't know how we're gonna get away from that. I don't know. There's just a big question here. I don't know how this is going to work, even temporarily, even 3 years, without something happen. I mean, and it's not your fault, and I'm not addressing that towards you, and you've done a phenomenal job with everything you do for us. I just have to vent and get this out. I just don't see how we can piecemeal this together when that school has been piecemealed together since it was created. I just, for the life of me, don't understand why we think of them as a red-headed stepchild for some reason and don't just take care of the problem. And it's not your fault. It's not our fault. We've done what we do. We've tried to get a GMP. We've tried to get the money, which is what the county wants us to do, and they just put it off and kick the can down to, a referendum that just, hopefully we'll get the referendum and maybe that'll fund it. That'd be great. If it'll fund 2 schools, that'd be great. But I just don't see how we keep cutting and then just wonder why our schools don't make it, why we don't have the facilities we need. Thank you.
Mr. Dudley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Braden, even if we do the phased design. At what point do we think the commission is gonna be able to fund, any part of it?
I don't know the answer to that. I haven't been participating in those commission budget meetings. Mr. Laconen's gone. Maybe Dr. Zmarzak can answer that, or Ms. Kinzer,
Yeah.
I mean,
So the key thing is, as we talked about in these meetings, is what's the long-term plan? Because we know the long-term plan is not portable to Spring Hill. It's also not rezoning, kids from Spring Hill to Central High School. That's a temporary plan, to get us where we need to get to. And I think, Ms. Kinder will corroborate, statement. There are some county commissioners that, basically said publicly, we give you too much money and we're not giving you any more money. So no matter what the claims are, no matter how much our gross is increasing, no matter how much, the planning commissions continue to approve neighborhoods and homes, there is a belief by some on the commission that, we give you too much money and we don't need to give you any more. Even though growth is happening and we're gonna be struggling to put kids in certain places in certain schools. As Taylor had talked about earlier today, there was a lot riding on this referendum in March, because the county commissioners have basically said, we're gonna wait to see what happens in March before we talk about these two schools. So if the community's going to have to know that if the referendum does not pass, there is going to be massive shifts. Because like Mr. Breeden told me, Dr. Marzick, if we don't have a long-term solution for replacement at McDowell, I cannot recommend that we keep McDowell open that much longer. Which I completely agree with. So there will be, if the community speaks loud and clear and says, no, we vote not to raise our sales taxes to build a new McDowell and add on to Spring Hill, then our reaction to that will have to be it'll have to be accordingly.
Well, as long as we've got commissioners that, and I realize it's not all of them, but if we have the, some that are saying that they don't wanna give us anything, you know, I just got concerns about going ahead and, proceeding with even the design. If we design it and then they never give us the funds to, construct it, we've just wasted our time. And, so I've got concerns about whether to proceed or not.
And I know that there are some people on the commission that say, fine, close McDowell. Disperse those children throughout the city. There's plenty of schools within a half mile or a mile away. But my question is about capacity. So when we disperse those children to the other surrounding schools, say we send them to Highland, or we send them to Brown, or we send them to Baker, Riverside, I know that there is a 200 or 300 unit apartment complex behind Lowe's that they're leasing right now. So those students are going to be going to Brown and to Highland. So now those schools are completely full. So we've either got to ask the commission for another elementary school somewhere from the ground up, or we've got to ask for, I'd say, at least 3 additions to some schools. So to me, a $23 million new school sounds a lot better than finding new land and acquiring it and building a building, or potentially building $10 million additions to 2 or 3, 4 new schools. It just doesn't make sense. And I guess they're like, this is a non-growth area. Well, Columbia is a growth area, and there's schools everywhere, but yet we want to close schools in a growing economy. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
And not only that, Mr. Howell, that right behind the tobacco warehouse on National Highway and Bear Creek Pike, there are condos going in there, and then I've also been told that the Plain neighborhood from like 10 years ago, that's behind the old Piggly Wiggly, they started to, put in homes there. So that neighborhood back there has been bought, and that's gonna be built out over the next year or 2
They're also,
Yeah, more homes are coming in.
they're also pushing dirt off Tom J. Hitch with a road that will connect from Tom J. Hitch to Mooresville Pike with 156 units. And it's not a concept, they're pushing dirt right now, ready to clear that out. 156 homes coming, a couple of those are gonna have kids.
Ooh, we're not getting anywhere. I'll just say this again, like a broken record I do every time. We do not have to have GMPs to come up with numbers. I know that the county commission keeps saying that they want it. They're making us spend a whole lot of money to get something that if we would just slow down and do some good number working, we can get close enough to make our ask, and then let the professionals work their magic on the back end of that. I don't think that's unreasonable for us to go back to doing. I think we've let and I've been saying it for 2 years now, or ever since this started, that we were gonna back ourselves in a corner on this, because it gives them an out to keep pushing this off. So, oh, we'll just wait for that GMP. And that's where we are. We've done that, and we're having to wait another year because we let it happen to ourselves. So I would prefer that we as a board start to pull back from that a little bit, continue to have good discussions, not just on this project, but on any other one, with the professionals that are able to put some numbers together, understanding that it's not a GMP, but however, we can get some close enough numbers, and I know districts do this all over the state and all over the country, to get close enough numbers to go to their funding body to be able to make their ask. It does not require that GMP number, and I think we as a board need to go back that direction so that we can have some latitude and not spend extra hundreds of thousands of dollars to try to get there, and instead use that money in other places. And again, I think we need to start looking at those things, and I think it also gives us a little more freedom to be a little more reactive. Well, we're not already committed $1 and $2 million into a project before we decide this is a bad idea, which can happen, and I don't want that any more than anyone else. But I think to go to the bigger picture on this, I think we as a board have to have some more discussions about where we want to go. There are still, and I know we made a request for a specific Spring Hill High School addition and for McDowell to be replaced, but as I've noted, I still have questions about that direction. And I think since we have a year to look at this, I think it would be prudent of us as a board to go back and have more discussions about what is the best. I think Mr. Howell brought up some great points about about some growth. These things are changing. They're changing over the last year that we've been talking about this. Maybe we need to go back and look at what makes more sense. I've questioned all along that this new McDowell only adds, 114, 130 seats maybe at tops. If there is that much growth in that area, perhaps we need to be looking at building a school that's a little larger than that. Maybe that's what we should be doing. I don't know, but I think it's worth, again, evidently it looks like we've got a year to talk about this, or at least 6 or 7 months. I think as a board we should start talking about it a little further and see what other options we can come up with. I still question, as Mr. Howell did as well, I have some doubts about turning an 800-student school into an 1,800-student school. And even if, and I trust that Hewlett Spencer's done a wonderful job in building some schools and doing some things for us, I still think you're kind of making the squeeze on an older property, and you're making it do something it was just never intended to do at that point. I think we could probably do some magic, but we may want to look at other options. And I don't know what that is. I don't know if that, I've questioned all along that I don't know if that school should be that large. Maybe it should be a smaller school. Maybe a dollar for dollar spending looks better spending it somewhere else. I've always said we should have been building another high school already in the Spring Hill area based on the growth. But again, I think we probably ought to talk about those things and what they look like. And I would like, as a board, for us to make those decisions based on real numbers and really weigh them out and pull some emotions out of it from all of us and look at what is the best financial course forward on some of these choices, and what we have to, and if we can't do them, or if the county commission is not going to fund them, because I have questions if they're talking about a 30-something cent raise this year. I think we're kind of kidding ourselves if we think next year they're going to all of a sudden do another tax raise to fund these 2 new schools at that point. So I think that's some other parts of discussion we need to have as a board on what that really looks like in our future.
I don't know if you've got direction here or not, but it sounds to me like, thank you very much.
Well, and you all saw me step back, and I just asked Mr. Hewlett, because he's got a lot more experience building schools than I do, if he had anything to add to this, and he didn't feel like he did. But, I know you all appreciate the wisdom they bring, and of course the 3 professionals in the room, he and Jamie and Ben all, I mean, they're the guys that are doing all the work. I just come and I met with them Thursday or Friday of last week and got all this information, and they put it in presentation
Were they the-
today, so they can really answer the hard questions.
May I? When Stan asked me that, I didn't have anything to add to the discussion as y'all were doing it at that moment. The one thing I would like to add that I thought of because of some of the other comments, I'm going into my 24th year of working with school systems. And I want to try to raise the sites in Murray County a little bit. Keeping up with numbers and where you're going to have students in a school and all of those things, that's essential. But I've watched one particular county that we built a lot of new schools in and did a lot of work. When we first got hired, they had portables all over the county. Within about 3 years, we eliminated all of the portables. They made a commitment that they were going to have secure facilities. We reworked the security for all the schools, and then they started building new schools. Their commission not only raised taxes to build schools, they raised taxes to build sewer lines and other things like that. And so Wilson County really took off when business and industry, now, see, your residential, you're going to get that. That's coming because they're being pushed here from Nashville and Williamson County. You're going to get that. That's costing you money. And it's creating demand for more tax dollars. What Murray County needs is for the people who invest in businesses and commercial and industrial and jobs and the things that bring money in, investment into your community. And one of the main things that will help do that is for the commitment of the county school board and the commission to show that education and everything you can do for education, because people who are bringing their families from other places want to know that their employees, when they invest in a community, their employees' children can go to the public schools and have good public schools. So that's it. Specifically, I want to address the thing about McDowell. When you go to any site, if you talk about sites, there's so much that's unpredictable. The site work on a beautiful site. I don't know how many of you went onto the site at Battle Creek Elementary School before we built it. But that site work is about $2 million more than what we've got bids to do the site work. And those are older prices. And as wonderful as that land was, the site work was more at Battle Creek Elementary than it will be to build McDowell. So that's a legitimate project. You've spent the money to design it. It would be putting a new school in the city of Columbia would be a really important thing to help attract investors, the people that you need to help bring money in that are contributing to the growth of your revenue as opposed to demanding more services for it. So that's what I wanted to say to you there. And I've felt that commitment from this school board since we got hired here. And I've seen a lot of money come from the county commission. We just happen to have a time here where there's some communication that needs to be done, and I think things are really good for Murray County, and the future's really bright here. The timing on some of these things and how to handle it, we'll work with you on the details, whatever. The difference in this thing about whether you have us go ahead and start designing something further on Spring Hill High School, really, it's a matter of a few months one way or the other. Your demand for when you need it to be delivered is what would be affected by that, not whether we could play catch-up for you. But thank you for letting me share that.
Thank you, as always.
This is probably the next really great growth county in every respect in greater Middle Tennessee.
And I actually leaving the budget meeting when they not gonna do anything to the two schools and not gonna address our capital request. I had one of the commissioners come to me and was very upset that they didn't have a GMP for Spring Hill. And I just kinda like, what? You know? And really, why don't you have one? We told you to have one. I said, well, if you have it, are you gonna fund it? And the answer was no, so, anyway.
By the way, fixing Spring Hill High School, as we've done the research and are ready to design to have it being comparable to Columbia Central, to really try to make it a premier high school, even with the new appearance on the front. That economically, when we do the numbers, that's your next best investment for high school classrooms.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Any other discussion about this, Dan? Do you have something to say? Anybody?
No, ma'am. I mean, without an okay, we will not move forward with any more design work. Just one thing I wanted to add, though, I did leave you hanging a little bit that we need an additional $300,000, and where that would come from, nobody knows. But hopefully within the next month or two, they're gonna bring back to us the completion of Battle Creek Elementary Schools and a final closeout. And I think there's some savings still, even though we've built the ball fields, there's some savings left in those jobs, but they haven't given me that number, so, and I don't believe they'll speak to it tonight because I've asked them, and they said, no, we're ready to give that number, but just know that's out there.
Mr. Howell? There will be some. Okay.
So real quick, you said you've done the numbers and you think that adding the capacity to Spring Hill is your best bang for the buck. Does that include building a new high school in Spring Hill? Over building a new high school in Spring Hill?
Over, you mean?
So, doing the Spring Hill High School project versus a turnkey brand new school.
Look at all you have there already that costs a lot of money, such as the football field and stadium. Even if you were gonna be you build a new school, you're gonna have to build a new stadium. There's so much infrastructure that's already there. Columbia Central was a great deal, and it's not just the new part we did, but the remodel of a lot of other property that was there, that's still there, that's like new now. And you can have the same impact by taking advantage of the investment you already have in Spring Hill High School and making it a first-class high school.
Thank you.
And their GMP came in at $110 million. So we can either stretch the Spring Hill High School out a little bit more, or we need to get permission to borrow $110 million to build a new high school.
Okay. On that note, I think we'll move on. Do you have anything else on zoning and facilities? These are all FYIs down here?
Actually, I do have, if you want me to present it, we just received, I'm sorry, my phone is going crazy. I do have the report from Facilitron. I just got it, again, at 4:15 this afternoon. But I can go through it pretty quick. I think it was requested that we present that, or I have not attached it to the agenda, or I can just attach it to the agenda for your review, however you all would like to do it. Yeah.
I would like to look at it.
I can do that, and then we can go through it next month, or go through it to meeting, however you all want to do it.
At the August meeting. It's just go on and attach it. That way we have a chance to look at it, and we'll put it under new business if there's any discussion. So,
okay.
Thank you.
That's all we have.
We've been waiting. Okay, thank you. Then we're ready for policies. The first policy to post is a new policy. Actually, there are two policies, right?
All right, there's two before that.
Okay, two before that. Where am I?
If you click on policies to post.
Okay.
You're gonna see 5.303 and 5.311. These are coming about as, you all adopted the MOU, and so these are just two policy changes that are in that language of the MOU. The first one adds 2 personal days for teachers to observe religious holidays. The second one, adds domestic partner to bereavement eligibility.
Any question about that? All right, the next is the policies, about, CBD oil, correct? Hmm? Dr. Marzak?
Yes, ma'am. As discussed in the rationale, I was approached by, Monica and Campaign, and, they're the owners of American Southern, a national highway. Mr. Banks is one of our county commissioners, and they expressed a concern that they've had numerous school staff come in looking to explore, the use of CBD oil as it has become allowable under the 2018 Farm Bill, as signed into law by President Trump. But employees are fearful that if they test positive, it could impact their employment, so they're choosing to stay on prescription drugs that their doctors have recommended for them, with an alternative that could be a whole lot more, healthy and natural. So I believe Ms. Bonnie Banks is in the audience. I believe she's there. Ms. Banks, you in attendance? Is Mr. Banks there? Are either of the banks there? Ms. Renfro, you're shaking your head no. No, they're not here. Okay, gotcha. Okay, 'cause, yeah, one of them had said they were trying to make something about it. Yeah. I believe, Jake and I discussed this and run it past our insurance company. The insurance company didn't have a problem with it as long as we add some language, for required medical use. So I present this to the board to ask if you would allow this to be entered in the policy, because I believe it could help, some of our employees.
Okay, any discussion? Mr. Dudley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'm opposed to, allowing any use on school properties by teachers or students, or staff, period. We spent years trying to get rid of the, normal nicotine cigarettes, but if any of you have watched, the current news cycles, these CBD oil, apparatuses or cigarettes have a potential of exploding, and when they can blow a jaw completely apart, I've got a problem, or set fire, to the
Okay, point of
clothing.
order, Mr. Dudley, I don't think we're talking about anything, smoking. I'm sorry, I don't mean to, and Mr. Dudley's got the floor. I interrupted him, so.
Sorry.
Mhm.
Go ahead, Ms. Dudley, please. Sorry.
Well, I think some of these devices are beginning to be able to use this CBD oil, and so I have concerns, with allowing any of it. If people wanna do it off premise, that's fine, but I don't think they should be allowed to bring it on school property and then use it, period.
Okay, Mr. Beaver?
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. On, like this, CBD oil, it can be absorbed into your system, and professional truck driving, you're required to take a drug test. It shows up in your blood, you know, you get your license pulled. So, you know, if a truck driver can lose his job for using this, why do we need teachers to be using it, or employees?
So as allowable under the 2018 Farm Bill, if you were to down an entire bottle of CBD oil, you would not test above 0.3% THC, which is found naturally in the hemp plant. So that's currently what the law allows. And just to kind of clear up, Mr. Dudley, we're not talking about liquid that is added to e-cigarettes or e-movies. This is a medical alternative. It's a liquid you would find in a bottle with a dropper, and you ingest it orally. It would not be taken in school. It's generally taken drug test. And if you did not exceed 0.3%, then that would not be, grounds for termination. And so that's the reason why the 0.3% THC is on there, is because that's the most that CBD oil would affect your system as it naturally occurs in the hemp plant. If that makes sense.
Okay, seeing no more lights, this policy will come up at the board meeting. We can, if there are no other questions, we'll go on to the next policy. The next policy is, the use of school vehicles. This is about the third month in a row we brought this to them. Dr. Marzak asked to bring it to the work session because they were going to, look at it and review it. So, is there any discussion, Dr. Marzak? You all have the policy there. We looked at I'm just not saying one or the other, but we looked at the governmental policy for vehicles as opposed to our policy. I assume that, and we were going to vote last month on using the governmental one, and Dr. Marzak, you asked to bring it back to the work session. So you have any comment to make? Are you listening to me?
This was vetted, Mr. Breed and I talked about it, Dr. Woodard and I talked about it, and, we're all comfortable with these recommendations coming forward.
So tell me again, in red is what you're proposing, and blue is, what's, it looks all red. Oh, okay,
Blue is an additional, that, because this is already in red.
Okay.
So that's an additional color, asking for additional language to be added.
All right. Any discussion about this? Ms. Parker?
I was just wondering, what's the reasoning behind taking out in the case of transport via school bus for school children?
So by taking that out, there are certain situations, unique situations where, I mean, personally for me, I've been at a school and there was a parent and a child waiting for somebody to come pick them up, and, they weren't there, so I said, hey, I'll just take you home, not a problem. Those children were not bus riders, they were car riders. They just happened to be trained by a parent or a spouse. So, by striking that out means that that's still allowable. If not, then it would not be allowable.
Any other discussion? Let me back up just a minute. On the policies to post, the ones that, are the policies in, that the MOU, precipitated having to do, can we put that on consent, that one, those policies? Okay. The other policies I will put on new business for us to have further discussion. Okay, and then final adoption. And let me get back to my page here. That is the only thing about this software that drives me crazy.
Those are two policies that have been posted for the required amount of time, and they'll just be up for final adoption for the second reading in August.
All right. Are there any comments about those policies, or can we put that on consent? Okay. The next policy to be reviewed, we specifically asked and had the discussion about the discipline policy, and that we review it. So, that policy is there before you, so if there's any discussion about it. Do you want, Mr. Lang?
Madam Chair, I do have some discipline data I'd like to share with the board. This information is from 2017-18 student information system and the 2018-19 school years. And the last column will show a change based on the infractions, et cetera. I just wanted to provide some data because the last time we met, we just did not have any. And I was kinda surprised that we were back on 6.30. I thought we were just gonna move forward with, updating to the current discipline policy that that the board had approved earlier. So, let me hand these out and we'll discuss.
While you're doing that, Mr. Lang, have you all looked at the discipline policy book to make sure it is aligned with the policy? 'Cause
that was the change that we brought forth the first time. This is the third time that you all have seen this. The first time we aligned those with the handbook. The board did adopt a handbook. Policies were not changed within that handbook, and so we were trying to make the policies in the handbook, change. As far as which ones to use, that's up to you all. But both Mr. Lang and I did think that you all had decided last meeting to make sure
Stick with
that
the policy.
the handbook
Right.
match what was currently posted on 6.300, and so that's what we were going to do.
I think the reason we brought this forward is board members wanted, I think this is what we wanted to look at and have a basic discussion about discipline in general.
Right, and what you have in front of you, the policy that's posted with the changes in red, that would make, if that policy was changed, that would make it align with what was in the discipline handbook. Again, either way the board wants to go, either we can do the 6.300 with the old disciplinary changes before the committee wanted to make these changes, or you can vote for this policy to be adopted, and we would, again, change the
Then
handbook.
you would align the book with it, so it's, okay. All right, Mr. Lang.
Yes, some of the changes that are different from the, handbook, which I brought one with me, has a, statement of adoption from the school board in 2017. How they didn't get aligned, I do not know, but, if you look at the data that I provided, there's some ups, there's some downs. The greens are where we're reducing, the number of infractions, et cetera. One thing about this particular handbook that's just a little different from what's in the, board policy, it really just kind of uses some of the same, consequences, but kind of put them in a different order. Our focus right now, and I'm gonna segue back to the discipline piece, is that, you know, our attendance rate is really good across the district. As a school district, we were right at 95%, 94.46. But the chronic absenteeism is what the schools are getting graded on now, part of their grade by the state. And chronic absenteeism is missing 10% of instructional time, whether it's with a doctor's note, whether it's with a parent note, whether it's with a suspension, or just a regular unexcused absence, I did not show up. So a lot of the things that we had adopted in this book, which we honestly thought was policy, puts more opportunities for in-school suspension before suspension. It just moves it in some different orders, because the goal now is to work on our chronic absenteeism, and suspensions directly impact chronic absenteeism. Now, there are times where students need to be separated from the school. So we're looking at several things to impact academics in a positive way and behavior in a positive way. Okay, I'm too loud. I am so sorry. No one's ever told me that. So we're doing several things. Matter of fact, I met with Ms. Dawson today at Horace O'Porter. You know, I will be bringing probably at our next work session some ideas to, if it's a low-level offense, for example, they're at their 8th defiance of authority, and it says suspend and refer. If it's a low-level offense and the student is not a danger to themselves or others, instead of waiting on a hearing date where the kid is just suspended, remember, if they miss 4 days suspended in a quarter, they're chronically absent. The grade of that school suffers. by the state accounting. We'd rather for that kid to stay in ISS for 4 days until the parent is able to come to the hearing. Now, if it's a student that is and these are things that I'm going to bring to you, but I just want you to kind of wrap your brain around a little bit. The things that, infractions that fighting, a threat to a teacher or a threat to another student, they're a danger to themselves or others. We want to look at opportunities for those students to go to Horace O. Porter until their hearing. We don't want them just sitting at home counted as suspended, because it says suspend and refer. That was okay when we weren't getting graded for chronic, and we were only getting graded for our total attendance rate, which is good at pretty much all of our schools, right at 95% across the district. But the chronic absenteeism gets up to, in some schools, 24, 25% chronic absenteeism. All it takes, a couple of sick kids, it impacts your chronic numbers. We don't want to layer suspensions on top when we can handle it differently in ISS. But if it says suspend and refer for something like, not moving from seats like that and just, defiance or whatnot, but no threat, no issue towards any other children at the school, that kid should be allowed to stay in ISS. Because now we're in a different world. We have to look at our suspensions. We have to use them as sparingly as possible, but there are times that we do have to suspend. We don't want to take that away, of course. Also, as we move forward with our virtual school, there will be opportunities where the students still can be at home working and get counted present because of the workflow they've done in Edgenuity. We're not quite there yet. But we're looking for opportunities to, instead of just suspend and kids sit at home, it impacts our ADM, it impacts our attendance, and ultimately the school itself will suffer. So we're not trying to change and go light on behavior issues, but we have to be smart and change things. For example, in the policy, it states a student assigned to Horace O. Porter must arrive, it's in district policy, by 7:45. And the old way was, you're not here, see you tomorrow. Horace O. Porter, it doesn't count against their attendance. It counts against Mount Pleasant. It counts against Riverside. It counts against the schools. So what we've done, and I got to admit this time, we have varied policy just a little bit before it's been changed. If the kid's 10 minutes late, bring them in. They just stay 10 minutes later. We've got to match our policies with the new environment that the state has put on us, because our schools are going to get letter grades with this chronic absenteeism factoring in. And the last thing we want to do is, by our policies, make the chronic absenteeism worse. So yes, I did ask Ms. Dawson this year, let the kid in if they're 10 minutes late. Keep them 10 minutes after. But don't send them home because they're 30 seconds or a minute late. It's going to impact our zone schools terribly. So these are some of the things, some few changes that I will be bringing that I didn't bring this time. But right now we're trying to decide what direction would you like us to go in. Because school is getting ready to start and we need guidance on what we need to do. We can make some of these subtle changes with whether to suspend and refer or stay in ISS if there's no threat to the student or other students or staff at the school, and give them an option to go to the alternative school while they're waiting on their disciplinary hearing. So we're just looking for a little guidance at this point.
Do you have any statistics on how many are considered chronically absent because they're not at school, period, or because they're suspended? There'd be a big difference.
When we compute the chronic absenteeism, I have not broken it down by child, by student of the particular reason why they were chronically absent, whether it was some suspensions that were involved, et cetera. However, I've got every student in the county, what they were, what days they missed and why. I was planning on sending that back to the school for them to desegregate, because there's a whole lot of students. And I honestly just can't pull that data.
I would think that would be the highest percentage of those that are just plain not in school.
That is correct,
as opposed
probably.
to those that are suspended in.
But each percentage, if we can lower a percentage of chronic per school by 5%, by just changing some ways we're doing business, that would be a big, statistically important decision.
Mr. Penning.
I know where you're coming from, and I agree with where you're coming from. But I sure would have liked to hear that instead of suspending the student for 4 days before the hearing, let's keep him in school, because then he'll be learning something for those 4 days instead of just sitting at home. Or if the kid is 10 minutes late coming to H.O. Porter, let him in, because at least he's in school that day.
I agree.
Well, that's something we should have been doing a long time ago, instead of just doing it because it's going to affect the grade for the school. That's something that, as far as I'm concerned, that you should have been doing right along, because surely a kid's going to learn more 4 days of school than he's going to learn sitting home watching Captain Kangaroo or whatever.
Wait a minute. If your suspension is based on something they've done at school that's inappropriate enough to be suspended and remanded to HOP, they don't need to be walking in the hall at that school. I understand what you're saying, but they need to be in some sort of setting where they can get, but not where they're I've been suspended, but I'm walking the halls, I'm going about life as if nothing's happened. There's got to be consequences. Nobody can learn anything unless there are consequences for your choice.
That's not what I'm saying, but he said that kids that weren't a danger to other students or danger to walking to teachers and that were suspended 4 days until they had a hearing. And then at the hearing, it was probably said, well, it wasn't quite that bad. That student could have been in school and should have been in school for those 4 days a long time ago, instead of just saying we're going to leave them in school now because it affects our rating. I mean, we're in here for the children, and that should have been stuff that was been done a long time ago.
Mr. Lang, I think we're here tonight talking about this again because over and over, even during collaborative conferencing, we hear a lot of discussion about discipline in the schools, perhaps not being consistent, and that's why some of this came to our attention, that and the realization that we had a policy that supersedes this manual. Yes, we did approve it, but I guess the assumption we had is that the two had been collated. Okay, so now we're to the point where do we just stay with the policy and have your discipline guide be correlated with that, or do we do the policy as you all presented it to make the policy book? Some principals went by the policy and continue to go by the policy because they knew they superseded it. Some use the policy manual, so there's not consistency there. So that's why we're at this point. So I don't know whose light is this, Mr. Beaver.
Okay, I guess I go back to old school. There's consequences for your actions. And if a student is told to be at H.O. Porter at 8 a.m. in the morning, they don't mean 8:01. They mean 8 o'clock or 1 minute before 8. And, 'cause when you get out into the real life and you start being 5 minutes, 10 minutes late to work, what's your employer going to say? He's going to say, hey, man, you need to go find you another job. So what are we teaching the kids by saying, oh, come on, we'll overlook you this time? I mean, you're saying that, oh, it's okay to mess up over here and then come over here to H.O. Porter, and we'll still let you in. There's got to be some consequences for kids' actions where they, and that's the way I feel.
Mr. Dudley.
Well, I agree with Mr. Beaver. What do we do? You said a student that's 10 minutes late. Oh, come on in, it's no big deal, you can stay 10 minutes later. But what do we do if he's an hour and 10 minutes, or 2 hours and 10 minutes, and then the staff is sitting there saying, hey, I've gotta go home, I can't stay here because this student can't be here in the morning when it's supposed to. I mean, we have to draw the line at some point and stick to our standards. You know, I just go ahead and give you my honest opinion. I think we've got discipline problems, and we've got the fact that all discipline is not treated fairly, equally among schools. One school has one set of standards, and they're using a book, and the other one's using policy. I think we need to get our policy lined up and make sure that any discipline book aligns with the policy. And so I think we've got some work to do.
Mr. Howell.
So, I do understand where you're coming from. If you're late in the real world, only so many times before you're fired, you know. I get that, and I think there should be consequences, but these are also children. And sometimes they're late, it's not necessarily their control. If their parents bring them in late, that's not necessarily the child's fault. Now, I'm not saying that gives them a pass, but I'm looking over the sheet you've given us, and it's pretty interesting things on here. I want to talk about one thing real quick, and it's the violation of dress code. I thought dress code was relaxed between 2017 and 18 and 2018 and 19. So when we had a dress code, there were 70 infractions. When we didn't have a dress code, there's 235 infractions. I'm confused as to... We do, but before this, it was a button-up polo shirt, and now you can wear anything, and not anything, within reason, but there seems to be more infractions. So I thought, from what I understood, relaxing the dress code was supposed to make things just hunky-dory, and evidently the numbers don't bear that out.
If I can answer that, that jumped out at me as well. And here's where I think we went with that. I can't speak for principals and assistant principals, et cetera, but my thoughts on this would be, okay, we've given you this much, so we're going to make sure we're really going to enforce all the way to this point, which we didn't do the year before. So we had a dress code policy the year before. For the whole district, 70. This came out of I-Now. Maybe they dealt with it differently, but now they've started to put it in the system, and they said, look, it's relaxed enough to where you can do this, so we're really going to write you up every single time. I would say in dress code, I doubt we had more that this past year than the year before. We just treated it a little bit differently.
Well, maybe, but my only problem with that is I heard administrators talking about how it was such a chore to have to govern and be over the dress code.
Yes.
And so now they're over-applying the policy. I don't know, man. I'm not sure I buy that, just to be honest with you. I think it may be time to look at going back to a different dress code policy. I mean, obviously one that worked better. It worked better. The numbers bear out.
Now, I've heard the comment that discipline is out of control, this and that and whatnot. The data doesn't suggest. One of the largest issues that we've had, tardies in vapes, as far as increases, because we're spending more and focusing on vapes more this past year than we did the year before, for sure. Rude and disrespectful behavior, down 325. Disruption and interference, down 217. Now, one thing you might or might not be aware of, all of our schools have gone through a tier level 1 training on RTI squared B. That's with interventions for instruction, a response to intervention, instruction, and discipline, okay? They have a process that they've all gone through, a baseline of how teachers, staff react to discipline issues. Some schools have been trained in Tier 2. There's a Tier 3 that some schools have made it to already. What this allows you to do is every kid in the building is a Tier 1 kid. They get this kind of information, they have the same consistency, etc. Then when kids move to Tier 2, we have different interventions and handle them a little bit differently than the Tier 1 students. So when you combine the RTI squared and connect that to instruction and intervention and put the behavior piece to it, there's that relationship, and they're working on. That's why when I started looking at rude and disrespectful behavior, down 325 from the year before. Those are the kind of things I see RTI squared, B for behavior, kicking in at schools at the tier level 1. And then when I see disruption and interference down, and I see some of these others that have been defiance down, how the teachers and staff are relating and responding based on their training may have a lot to do with that. So we're doing a lot of different things and taking a lot of systemic approaches to try to connect the dots with instruction, as we would say in here, learning, and keeping kids in class, in school, and addressing their behaviors in a different way. One last thing I like to add, when we talk about discipline and we talk about instruction and something that we should have been doing a long time ago, we started a pilot this summer. And we had 3 kids from Withorn, over age 6th graders, on that bubble of being sent to Horace O. Porter. Why? Because there are 7th, 8th grade bodies in a 6th grade classroom. So our focus to expand what we call our Back on Track program, to identify our students. I've got every middle school kid in the county, their profiles, worked with their counselors. By 6th grade, we want to start moving kids and catching them back up to where they're not 16-year-old 8th graders by the time they get into 8th grade. So self-esteem, putting our emphasis on instruction and teaching kids and getting them back on track has a lot to do also with disruption. What a 7th grade person or 8th grade person will laugh at and be silly at in class is different from what a 6th grader would do. But we've got some of these students that are 13 in the 6th grade sitting with 10-year-olds. And we've got to get past that and get kids back on track. So we're trying several different things to move kids and work with our discipline, our attendance, and our chronic absenteeism all at once.
Thank you, Mr. Lang.
Yes, ma'am.
I think we wanted to have the discussion. Thank you for this information.
Yes.
As far as I can tell from what we did the board policy supersedes, and I know that Amanda's done the work to make sure that the manual meets that.
Okay.
So.
That's what we'll do.
Ms. Kinzer, I had
excuse me, Mr.
something.
Sims.
The numbers look like we've really improved. Has there been any discussion with our administrators that, well, just to put it, I guess bluntly, to skew the numbers because our numbers were so bad?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Matter of fact, the administrators have not seen this document.
Okay. Well, I mean, Dr. Woodard has said in multiple meetings that, you know, numbers are very, have a misproportionate number of African Americans, Hispanic, I don't know what other demographic, but, and so my concern, and a very good friend of mine that I've very much trust said that was discussed, and that concerns me greatly. if we are looking over things, sending students, which is what come out in collaborative conferencing, teachers send students to the office, absolutely nothing is done, there's nothing reported on that, that is a problem. And if we're only doing that because we're trying to make our numbers look better, appear better, then that's a really a disservice to our teachers when they send a student to the office or to whomever and nothing is done.
I'm going to say, from my point of view, that's not something that I would ask administrators to do. If the shoe fits, wear it. And I would not ask them to change any decision based on demographics, because if we don't have the right numbers, how can we intervene? How can we address those particular behaviors if it is by a particular demographic group and help them achieve and be successful if we don't know what's going on? So this was pulled. I have no idea what was put in the system, but I do want to tell you this last thing. Our new system, EduPoint, it has it won't be ready when we start school. We'll pilot this a little bit, second semester, and be ready for the following school year. But it has a component where the teacher will create the referral, pick the administrator with a drop down, and it goes in their queue, and we can monitor if referrals are being worked, how long they stay in the queue, and a response will go back to that teacher when that referral has been worked electronically. So we're very excited about some things that we will have in place with EduPoint to give teachers better feedback, and also principals can monitor how long referrals are staying in the queue of an assistant principal and what's not getting worked in a timely manner. So we'll be able to pull that data as well, but it won't start at the beginning of this school year because we got to get all of our teachers up to speed on EduPoint. But we will be starting that the second semester with some schools.
Well, and that's good, that because teachers, they, like I said, I trust our collaborative conference teachers that they weren't just lying to us, that they did not, you know, a student would show back up and there would be no, and I think by law they have to be told within a certain amount of time what the discipline, if either nothing or whatever the discipline was. So I think that's part of what the teachers were looking for, was some type of answer, whether it be nothing is going to happen or step whatever.
What the consequences are.
Yes, ma'am.
That they need that. And you, Mr. Mang, being over this, then you are charged by this board to make sure that there is consistency. And Mr. Sims, there were 5 of us that were on collaborative conferencing, and the things that were brought to us was an overall look of the schools in Murray County, not one specific school. And all of them had the same concern. What he said, child has maybe used profanity, has been defiance of authority, all of those type of not suspendable infractions, but should be taken out of the classroom. That's the teacher's right not to have that student in the classroom.
Yes, ma'am.
But then it comes right back, and there's no response. No, what's going to happen? What is the consequences? Now, I don't think it's teaching the student anything if that's the way it's done, because there have to be consequences for actions. I'm just saying, you as that over that, I think that we charge you to make sure there is this consistency.
Yes, ma'am. And that's one of the reasons why this new feature with EduPoint is going to be a big piece. And I've really pushed for that, and it will go into effect.
Okay. Any other discussion then? So we were just reviewing the policy, not, the policy as it is. So it's no action needs to be taken.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I note that you all may want to take a break, but if we can get through this other business, then we'll take a short break before the call special, okay? The first thing, these are instructional low bids, CTE, is that the, oh no, the strategic plan, excuse me. Yes, sir. Mr.
We have our strategic plan survey and strategic plan update set.
Okay, I see that, and,
There was one more policy too.
Oh, excuse me.
4.301, the interscholastic athletics, you all had wanted that one to be brought back, because
oh,
of
that's
naming new
right,
teams.
I'm so sorry, I got ahead of ourselves. Yes, that was to, the policy involving when you add a sport, and we do need to discuss that, so, you added language?
Right, the language on lines 28, 29, and 30, that language, would be a February deadline. And this also corresponds with the athletic handbook, which has that clause in it as well. So this language was taken out of the old policy 6.207, which likes clubs and organizations. We decided to put it in 4.301. It just made sense to put it in the athletics policy. And so, there's two actually. There was an April deadline at one time, and there was a February deadline at one time. I asked Chris Porter which one he thought would be best, and he thought February for budgeting purposes. The earlier, the better.
Okay, Mr. Moore.
So, to go with that, I guess it's not really the policy, but the other issue that came up in that discussion that night was, the assumption by staff that when a sport was approved, that means it could be just added to any school. And I really would like to have some more discussion as a board on that, because in the time I've been on this board, that was never the assumption or the understanding. Sports, when they were added, whether it wasn't just a new sport, it was a new sport to a school. So, again, I think I don't know how we need to clarify that, and I would be more than happy to hear other board members, but again, I would think we have always operated under if a sport is being added to a specific school, not just that if we've got soccer already in the district, we can just add, that staff can just add soccer at any time. I don't think that was ever the intention, as a board member. That's never the way I understood it took place, and I was kind of surprised to hear that was how it was being, that was the assumptions that staff was operating under.
You're right, Mr. Moore, and Mr. Dudley can probably back me up, but the intention of the board for that policy was, like Mount Pleasant adding soccer. We have soccer in a bunch of other schools, but that it's a new sport to Mount Pleasant. And that's what the policy refers to. If there's a new sport for your specific school, then you have to ask for that by February. Now, and I think when we're discussing the policy, it doesn't mean that you could not start having soccer after February. If you didn't ask for it before February, then it simply meant that your coach for that year would not get a supplement. And that was the intent of the policy when we did it. And that was mainly for budgeting purposes.
So are you saying that then they could have the soccer at Mount Pleasant as was requested, but that we would not pay a supplement for that coach?
Yeah, I mean, and like I said at the meeting the last time, they could start having the soccer at Mount Pleasant, but there would be no funds available, I guess is the best way to say it. There would be no funds available that come directly from the school board for transportation or anything like that, because the sport was asked for after February.
Mr. Beaver?
Okay, yes, my understanding that if we didn't have time to get it into the budget, uniforms, transportation, things like that, stipend, that, we couldn't just pull it out of there. That we had to have time and to do something.
Right. What it was meant was, that they can still start the sport, but they're not gonna get any support from the school board or school funds, because they didn't ask to start the sport before February. And I believe that was the intent of the whole policy.
Mr. Moore?
Okay, so I guess I'm gonna split the difference here. My complaint is mainly on an administrative functional level of what the board policy is versus how it was being implemented. I get a little more uncomfortable in this instance, again, because if we go back to the spirit of that was so that we weren't, either it wasn't a cost issue, it wasn't messing with budget. From what I understand from this, it seems like they've got that worked out. We've been told that they have funding that they can handle that. I'm less interested in trying to, being punitive towards the sport itself simply because there was a misunderstanding between administration and the school board. What I just want to do is clarify moving forward from this point forward to what we mean by what we say. I would be more uncomfortable in trying to shut down this specific sport just because of this happened. If they say they've got, and again, Chris Pointer says they've already, within their own budget, said that they've got the funding for it, I don't see any reason why that's not a problem. It seems like they've got that approved. Again, I don't really want to penalize these kids that are on this sport because we had a misunderstanding between us and central office. I would rather just straighten this out from this point forward so that moving forward, we get a policy in place if it needs to, or whether it's a procedure in place that functionally everyone understands this is what we mean, and then we just operate under that. That would be more where I would lean, personally.
Any other discussion? Mr. Dudley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I think the February deadline, I'd like to see it reinstituted, for financial reasons where we can make plans in the budget for it. But then I would also like for them to come before this board, before they start a sport anytime, because we've got to start looking at these Title IX, issues. You know, if they keep coming with sports for males, you know, at some point we had to say, no, we've got to balance some of it out, for the Title IX issues. And so, like I say, I like the February deadline, for financial, but I'd like for them also to come before this board, anyway, so that we know what sports are going to be started and that there's going to be adequate oversight, whether they're paid or not. So I'd still like to come for us.
I understand the policy will be up for review for us to vote on at the board meeting. Where do we stand with the Mount Pleasant soccer at this point? If the request was made prior to changing this policy, or I agree with Mr. Moore, I don't want to penalize them, and going forward if they think they can do this within their own funds. Ms. Morency?
The information that I have on it, we had a new principal. We have a new athletic director, and the principal was going by what our county athletic director told him. They have all the funds raised. They've been, they have, the goalposts have been donated. The only thing that would cost the district at all is the supplement. It's a boys' team and a girls' team, and it would be around $3,700 for both of them. So not each, but for both of them. So that would be the supplement.
Okay. Yes. Oh, Kristen, excuse me. Ms. Parker.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, I don't want to punish kids, but I do think that we as a board need to be conscious of what it actually costs to operate a sport. And it's not just uniforms, it's not just transportation. It again goes back to the actual playing surfaces that we offer these children and the access that we offer them to those playing surfaces. So knowing that we've already had an issue at one of our largest high schools for this particular sport, and it took a long time to get some movement on actually getting a space for that particular sport. I don't know how this all plays into it. It's my understanding that there's other sports there at Mount Pleasant Middle School that don't have access to playing surfaces, and so it just kind of doesn't make sense to me that we're just going to jumpstart somebody in front for whatever reason. I just think there's more to it than this, and I just have some real concerns about that. It's my understanding there are going to be fees involved for the students. I don't think we've seen anything related to that, for them to play the sport. I imagine you can fundraise anything if you set the fees high enough for kids to play, but then what is the impact on other kids that may or may not be able to afford those fees? I just think there's a lot more to it, that we're just rushing a decision that I don't think should be rushed.
Mr. Moore?
Okay, I'm switching gears because I'm back on policy, sorry. Ms. Parker, I think you make some valid points. I mean, I'll be honest, I have some concerns with the 2 new schools we added, well, the middle school, I guess, elementary school really doesn't have anything. Just, and again, I think it was under the same assumption that they'd been approved elsewhere and the schools could add them. I just, again, moving forward, those are things I wanna clear up. One thing I would wanna look at is under the policy, is it 4.301? Is that what it is, Amanda? Under line 29, could we look at removing the for supplemental pay and just simply go to schools cannot add a new sport without permission from the school board? I think that starts to get to the point where I would like it to come to us so that we can look at the whole picture there. And I think that's really, and maybe we can refine that later. Maybe that needs further discussion to really get into what that looks like. But I think I would like us to have a holistic picture. What are we really adding? I mean, it's one of those things that you add 1 or 2 here, there, in a year, and the next thing you know, you realize you've got a considerable expense per year for field sports and whatever, and it adds up. I would just like that the body of this board to have a better understanding of that, so we can kind of look at the big picture. So if we could look at maybe doing that, changing just that wording, I think that's a start. I think there's still probably further discussions that need to take place on this, but that's where I'd like to see it start.
Mr. Howell?
And Ms. Parker's exactly right. This kind of ties into a whole bigger thing, a whole bigger project I've been working on with Chris Pointer, that it takes more than just a ball and, some kids out there. I mean, I know people mention jerseys and things like that. It's my experience that we don't provide jerseys. That's up to the individual soccer teams, baseball teams, football teams, so that's not an issue. Transportation, once again, those teams have to find their own transportation. Now, they can rent one of our buses. We do that, but, so really, we're talking about the capital. We're talking about the stipends. And once again, like I said, we're working with something on stipends to possibly make that where it's more fair. But the biggest thing is the capital. Like she said, we have a long list of facilities ahead of this one. So, like she said, are we going to just jumpstart this one and be like, hey, there you go, there's your brand new field. Meanwhile, you've got schools that have been needing things for much, much longer.
We will need to take some action at some point, because a request was made, and we can't make it in this time. So, do we need to add that to the agenda next time, just to take action on the request, in addition to the change of policy? I have no objection to changing the wording, as he suggested. How do you all feel about that? Huh?
I'm switching back to the other subject.
Oh, now we're going back.
I would request that Jake could give some direction on this. While I feel like that has always been the intention of this board, I have not found anything in policy that says that what took place, where they approved Mount Pleasant to have this soccer team, that says they couldn't do that. I'll just be perfectly honest. And I think Jake would probably agree with that. I've looked through policy. I haven't seen anything. So while I dislike it, and while I feel like it's not where we as a board intended for things to be, it just simply wasn't there. Again, I would let it move ahead personally. That's where I would be on this case. I just want to stop the gate here and make sure we're correcting this moving forward. But that's just my position.
Did he could handle those 3,700 per thing within his? It's not per. Just one time. Okay. All right. Mr. Howell.
I was just really going to echo him. I agree. I mean, you can't have a policy in place and then retroactively make that happen. It's there. I mean, if you could, we could change a lot of things around here. But unfortunately, you can't do that. So, both teams are gonna happen, and hopefully they have the funding in place. They've fundraised evidently some, that maybe they can do what they need to do. So, but they will also have to be added to the queue of things we have to fix.
All right, once again, we need to take some kind of action. I'm just looking at the agenda. Do you want me to put that as a consent item, or do you want me to put that on new business? You don't see any action to take because the policy wasn't. Then that's a done deal. Okay. Ms. Parker.
I was just going to say, since we can find $3,700 for supplements for soccer, does that also mean, going back to our budget, that it includes supplements for drama, band, all those that I think last year were funded by grants.
I don't know about those supplements being funded by grants. I can't answer that question. Dr. Marzak?
I believe Mr. Lang applied for the grant again in order to give the supplements to our teachers. Is he still in the audience?
Yes.
Mr. Lang, do you have any progress on that? Do you have an update?
We don't have a final from the state yet, but we are very hopeful. I hate to use that word again. But we anticipate that we will be funded at the same level, if not more, to make sure that our fine arts departments are able to receive some of the stipends that they received this past school year. Matter of fact, the goal is to expand our whole child opportunities before and after school.
So does that mean, like, for cross-country that has gone on at various elementary schools, I don't believe those coaches get supplements. At elementary? So, I mean, again, I just feel like if we can just magically find $3,700, I just think that we need to be fair across the board. And there have been sports that have operated for years without any kind of supplement. I really think that you cannot put this genie back in the bottle. You just can't. So we really need to know where this all fits in, I feel like, from a budgetary standpoint, and I don't feel like where we're at that we really have all that information to be able to plug that in.
Mr. Howe?
So, and you're right, so that's something that we're looking at. So, I've talked to Chris Pointer, I've talked to Mr. Laconin. When it comes to budgeting for the way our stipends work, it's a freaking nightmare, and basically, it's a pot of money. And so that's something we're looking at doing, is trying to actually make levels and tiers. Depending on the sport, it would fall in a certain tier. Let's say cross-country, for instance. I'm making this up, by the way. But it would be like a tier 1 sport, because does it require time? Yes. Is it, are you managing 30 football players where you're practicing, 3 times a week? No. You are practicing. It's a relatively easy sport to coach. I'm saying that relatively. Not discounting that, but it'd be like a level 1. Say, well, right, and that's one thing too. An elementary school versus a Spring Hill or Central football team where you're managing 60 people with assistant coaches, and that'd be maybe a tier level 3, and they would also be based on your years of experience as a coach, not as a teacher, and that would be a key component to it, because you have teachers who may come in as I've taught for 20 years versus, and then, do the minimum to get by, versus a teacher who has come in as a, level 1 or year 1 teacher who may, take them to state and finals. And this 20-year teacher gets paid way more. And so there's not any fairness and equity to anybody in that whole scenario. So, plus it would make it easier to actually budget. So.
May I add, Madam Chair? It's nice to see the tier movement, because the tier has been part of our strategic plan for athletics and arts for almost 3 years. So it's nice to see it come back on the table.
Okay, moving forward then. There will be soccer at Mount Pleasant High School, but we will vote on this middle school, but the policy will be up for us to vote on at the August meeting. No further discussion, then now we shall move on. The strategic plan, Dr. Marzak, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, ma'am. So,
Okay, hopefully you all have a chance to look at them, and review them, and yes, hopefully the data will help us going forward. All right, now we are ready for instructional low bids, correct? No. Well, okay.
For 3.6, as per the strategic plan, under accountability, these are the school board community evaluation survey results. I would highly recommend, your analyzing these. We may want to have a discussion at a later work session with some of the information you see. The community evaluation is, if you'll look at it, is, I mean, I'm trying to put this in a very...
No, I looked at it and it's not good. Yes.
And I would like to see the board respond publicly, to some of these things, to let the public know overtly that you are addressing some of these things. And I hope that we see growth over the next year with how the community responds to some of these questions.
And it is, I looked at them more than once, and it is concerning how the community looks at the school board and the degree of trust, I think, that they have in us. So, yes, I think we do need to have further discussion about it, and hopefully you all will have time to review it further. Okay, well, next would be the community creativity suggestions. Those are a list of things.
So for the creativity suggestion, or for the strategic plan, we basically identify, and increase, the number of selected by 10% year over year. So, at the August board meeting, if it's agreeable to the board, we will be honoring the following people on the board agenda who made creativity suggestions that we saw as applicable and be able to implement for the FY 21 school year. So this will be starting in August, and starting in July 1 of 2020. And glad to recognize, we did also hit the strategic plan, expectation of exceeding, by 10% the number of people that submitted suggestions. We did a really big push in March, April, and May. Tell people, please tell us what you want to hear. We believe that worked. But Cassie, April Miro, Gaynell Howell, Mr. Howell, no line. Ellen Kelly, Amy Giffen, Grant Colbeck, Jessica Crawford, Laura Collins, and then we hope to be recognized on the board meeting with the city for their suggestions for the creative plan and our acknowledgement of their selection for their, commitment to their practice.
Okay, and then moving on, strategic plan updates, that's what you're giving us, correct? Or is it?
So for 1.7 of the strategic plan, quarterly updates are required to be given by the board. And, I'm proud to say that we are on track with all of the strategic plan initiatives. And that's a quarterly update, and the next one will occur in October with everything that's been done today.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Marzak.
You're very welcome, ma'am.
Now, can we do instructional low bids? The first one is, CTE purchase of TruTech. Is there any discussion about that? Let me get down here to it. Okay, the bid, moving on then, professional services contract. Is there any discussion about that? Lisa is here if you want to speak to it. Do we need? Okay. I assume we're putting these on consent then if there's no comments. The next one is, special ed contracts, bid number 20-004. Any discussion? All right. Renewal of the next one is 19-013, renewal of site licenses for textbook and library management services. Any discussion about that? The next one is renewal of Ames Web. Any discussion about that? Come on now. Renewal of services with West Interactive Services Corporation. Any discussion? Okay, then I assume all of those bids would be on consent. And that's it. I'm correct? All right, I'm gonna, we are gonna have a call special, but I know that everybody probably needs just to have a little bit of a break here. I'm gonna say 10 minutes, but I mean 5. That means 10 minutes. If I say 5, it'll be 10. So that means that at 1:45, the meeting will be called to order, okay? No, I'll get Mr. Lang to call us in order. All right, I'm gonna, call special, meeting to order at this, moment. I'm pulling it up here. It does have roll call on here, so,
Well,
let's
I'll
do it.
just note that we are, have all members, wait, did we lose one? Except for Nathan and no? Is Jim
Nathan,
still here?
Jim's here.
Okay, so we have 10 board members, we have enough to conduct a meeting.
I'm not sure where he is, but he needs to come in here. Okay. Do we need, a motion to accept the agenda? Okay. A motion's made by Mr. Moore, seconded by Mr. Howell. All those in favor say aye. All right, motion passed. The attachment, the school board agenda that is presented is what you were presented earlier tonight in the work session. I'll entertain a motion. Wait a minute, I don't have that. I'll make the motion. I move that we, accept, I don't even have that figure in front of me, but I believe it was 6.408.
106, 408,
Oh, here, I do have it
438.
right here it is. Excuse me. That we take that back to the, county commission to seek funding. Is that worded as you all would like? Okay. All right, the motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Mr. Moore?
I would just like to say again, we've discussed this for quite a bit in the previous meeting. I think we still are presenting what I consider to be a reasonable number. It's not in any way excessive. And I unfortunately, I still feel like it does have some shortcomings on what we should be doing and taking care of. And I think, but to say that, I think there's some things that we've talked about addressing for next year to be able to address those and fully bring a better picture of what the budget should be. But I would support that this number is a reasonable request by the school board from our funding body.
Any other discussion? Then we'll have a roll call vote. Am I gonna call a roll here? Mr. Moore? Ms. Morency? Mr. Dudley? Ms. Hopkins? Mr. Howell? Mr. Beaver?
No.
Mr. Pennings? Ms. Parker? Mr. Sims? And Ms. Kinzer votes yes. All right, motion carried. Now, this will be presented on Thursday at 4:30 at the county commission meeting. I would really like any of you that could be there to be there. I've been at the meetings. The comment was made more than once. I was the only board member there. They recognize that, and we need to present our case. Dr. Marzak, you'll be in Gatlinburg, correct?
No, ma'am, I will be later. I have to be at the meeting is important. I'll be there.
Okay, great. I think we need to be there with the United Front. Hopefully, Ms. Inc. and her group will be also supporting us as they have consistently. 4:30 at the new Tom Prim this Thursday, right. We need to present our case. Is there any other discussion? Let me remind board members that you have till the 24th to complete the evaluation of Dr. Marzak. I don't know if there's any other discussion. Also, I know you know the dates are there for the ribbon cutting at the schools. The schools are absolutely, we're very exciting to see them and enjoy. Thank you so much for your hospitality and taking some of us through, and I know all of you look forward to the opening of those schools. Anything else? Then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. All right, motion made and seconded. All those in favor, leave.